Okay, now we're to the video within this series where we'll be considering examples about the third and fourth houses. So in the previous video, we looked at the principles, and there are quite a few principles, and I will post these on my website, AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, so you can check there for the list, which are all typed out and neat for you. But with each of these House Lord principle videos, I want to follow them up with some examples. So I've got two charts today to explore. And the first thing we'll look at will deal with the third house, which is brothers, younger siblings, courage, teammates, skills, etc. And what do a lot of people consider from the third house? Well, obviously the younger siblings, the younger brothers, or the sex of the younger sibling. And if they don't have a younger sibling, it can actually just be the sex of the sibling. But how do we determine that? Well, there are a few ways to look at it. And it requires that we consider the placement of the third lord as well as Mars. Now, why the third lord and Mars? Well, because these are both indicators for sibling. And what's the principle? Well, essentially we're looking to see, are these planets in odd or even signs? And are they aspected by more masculine or feminine planets? Now, what's the principle we want to consider? When we have the third lord in an odd sign, that's one point towards having a masculine sibling. Now we have Jupiter ruling the third house. The third lord goes into an odd sign. Libra is an odd sign. So remember, when we talk about signs, we start counting from Aries, because that's the natural zodiac. We also need to consider, is Mars in an odd or an even sign? Well, we have Mars in an odd sign. Mars is in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, number 1. That's an odd sign. If both of these planets would have been in even signs, well, then we would have leaned a little more towards female siblings. So that's the beginning. However, we need to keep following this because that's a little too simple. And we have to remember that the chart is built upon confluence and the direction, how it builds up over time. And so we need to look at a Varga, a divisional chart here, the Navamsha. And one of the principles that we considered is that if the Lord of the third and Mars are located in the Navamsha of an odd sign and are aspected by male planets, one's siblings will likely be male or masculine. So again, if the Lord of the third and Mars are located in the Navamsha of an odd sign, well, the Lord of the third, Jupiter is the third, so the Lord of Jupiter is Venus. So you'd see is Venus in an odd sign in the Navamsha. And sure enough, we go to the Navamsha and we see that Venus is in Aries, which is an odd sign. We need to find Mars as well. Mars is here in an odd sign in Sagittarius. It's the 9th sign. And if we want to take it a little further, we could even see the third lord. Where does it go in the Navamsha? And it goes into Libra. So it's still in Libra in the Navamsha, which is an odd sign. And this person only has one sibling, and that sibling is most definitely male. And one thing that I've seen oftentimes with these kinds of ways of interpreting the chart is someone will say, well, I go and I look and it says I should have all male or female siblings, and it's the opposite. All right, well, what I have found is that oftentimes it may be that you have a male sibling, but that male sibling is actually feminine. So it might be in a male body, but presents more feminine characteristics. The same thing if you have indications for a female sibling. Maybe the body is female, but expresses more masculine tendencies, masculine traits. So consider that. But this is an interesting process to follow. And again, the reverse would all be true if we were looking at the third lord at Mars and the ruler of the third lord if they were in even signs. And most people are going to get a mix. just so happens that this was the first chart I pulled up. I knew this person had a brother, and they all pointed in the same direction. Oftentimes what you'll see is a little bit of masculine, a little bit of feminine, a little bit of neutral, these sorts of things. And then you have to be the judge to see which one is actually stronger, which one has the most kinds of influences to it. Masculine planets, odd sign planets, or feminine planets, and even sign planets, or even signs. Yeah, planets and even signs. Now, another principal theme that we covered in our previous video dealt with courage, patience, and bravery. So the third lord in an angle or trine and in good dignity can indicate a courageous, patient, and brave native. So we find the third, Jupiter. We see, does it go to an angle or a trine? Well, it goes into an angle. But the follow-up is that it must be in good dignity. And this indicates a courageous, patient, and brave native. And even though Jupiter is in neutral dignity, Jupiter typically doesn't do well in signs of Mercury or Venus, because Mercury and Venus are natural enemies to Jupiter. So, neutral dignity, how do we want to consider that a little more detail? Well, we want to look at the Logitati of Ashtas. I don't think I can show that to you on this screen, but let's see what they are. So with Jupiter, there are only negative Logitati of Ashtas against this Jupiter. Venus is starving it to negative 224.7 points. Mercury is starving it to negative 11.6 points. And of course, you could ask, well, when I look at the aspected planets, I see that the Sun is aspecting Jupiter, which is a friend to Jupiter. We see that the Moon is not aspecting Jupiter. We see that Mars is aspecting Jupiter, which is also a friend of Jupiter, to 10 points. Well, why aren't these guys helping? Well, we look and we can see that, number one, the Sun is in a natural enemies sign, neutral dignity, but natural enemies sign, which takes away its capacity to help that Jupiter, and it's in a Baladi Avashta Bala, an infant state, so it can help as much as an infant can help. We see that Mars, it is in its own home, which is great, but it's in Amrita Baladi Avashta, which means it essentially acts like it's dead. So in this regard, the two planets that can help Jupiter, one's baby, the other's dead. The planets that can hurt Jupiter, Venus, Vrida, is old, so it can still do something, and Venus, which is in a Yuva of Ashta, wide awake. Not wide awake, that's the Jagrati of Ashta, pardon me. Yuva means it's an adult state, so it can hurt Jupiter as an adult could with that amount of power. And for more information on those, you want to look at the Introduction to Logitati of Ashta's audio course. It's about 8 hours, and it goes into great detail. Or The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2, speaks about it. There's a whole chapter on it. And this is on AshevilleVedicAstrology.com under the Astrology Audio and Video courses. So if you want to learn more about that, I'd highly recommend it. But for now, let's use these basic principles as best we can. Now, does this make the person courageous, patient, and brave? Well, not particularly. And Mars being in the 4th house, which is a house of one's emotions, it can make a person a bit rash. So patient, brave, and courageous, that's a person, a warrior, who knows how to fight and when to fight. When we get a third lord with some difficulty, as this one has, that makes a person a little more reactive rather than responsive. And then having Moon and Rahu together, especially with Moon in difficult dignity, that will also speak to a more reactive personality than a responsive personality. Okay, so let's consider 4th house for this chart. Let's see if there are any principles that make sense to look at here. Now, there are a few combinations with this chart that we covered in the previous video with the 4th house. One of them is that when Mercury and the 4th house and 4th lord are well supported, there is friendliness with relatives. When the opposite is true, one may not be liked or accepted by relatives. So again, when Mercury in the 4th house and 4th lord are well supported, there is friendliness with relatives. When the opposite is true, one may not be liked by relatives. Let's start with Mercury. We see Mercury is in a friendly sign with one of its greatest friends, Venus. So this puts 1 point towards friendliness with relatives. Next, we look at the 4th house, which has its lord in it. Sure, it's still Mars, but we have to remember that any time a planet is in its house or aspecting its own house, it supports that house. So we have the 4th lord in the 4th house also well supported. And even though this person does have some distance with their brother, their sibling, they are well integrated into their family, are well loved by their family, and do enjoy spending time with their family, extended family included, because of this principle. Now, another aspect of this chart that we can consider, this person has partial activation of this principle. And what is it? The lord of the 9th in an angle, the lord of the 4th in a friendly sign, and an exalted planet in the 4th gives a beautiful house. All right, now, we don't see an exalted planet in the 4th. So we don't have all aspects of this principle to be true. But we have two of the three. Is that correct? Yeah, the lord of the 9th in an angle. So we have Mercury in an angle, the 4th in a friendly sign, it's in its own home, and an exalted planet in the 4th. So no exalted planet in the 4th. So we have 2/3 of that principle active here. And when you read about these principles, when you study them, don't just throw something out because they don't have all of it active. Look at it in degrees or shades. So if this person would have had all 3 of these things activated, then you could definitely say you probably live in a mansion or a very beautiful dwelling. Since this person only has 2 of the 3, they probably live in a very nice home. And it's true, this person does live in a very nice home and have always lived in nice homes. Now let's look at another chart. We will return to the 3rd house for this chart. And we'll go through the same process that we did with the first chart, dealing with siblings and the gender of the siblings. So looking at this chart, maybe you can tell me, does this person have masculine, feminine siblings, male or female? And they do have a sibling, so it's not a trick question. And you can pause the video if you like and see if you can figure it out before we move on. Okay, well, let's check. So the 3rd lord. Saturn is the 3rd lord. Why is that? Because this is Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. This is the 3rd house. We see that Saturn goes into an odd sign. Sagittarius is the 9th sign of the zodiac. That is odd. We see that in the 3rd, we have a masculine planet. Remember that Jupiter and Sun and Mars are masculine planets. So speaking a little more towards masculinity here. We need to find Mars. Well, Mars is also in an odd sign, which is a masculine sign. And we can look at the 3rd lord, the lord of the 3rd, in the Navamsha. And what do we see? But we see that the 3rd lord, Saturn, goes into Aries, an odd sign, and Mars itself is in an odd sign. So this points to a predominance of masculine energy. And this person does have a brother as well. So we've had 2 pretty clear, straightforward examples of how you can find the gender or gender tendency of a sibling within someone's chart. Now, what's another principle that we want to consider? Well, when the above is true, once we've determined that we have a brother here, and the 3rd lord and Mars occupy a sign ruled by a benefic in the Navamsha, the brothers will likely be fortunate. So when the above is true, and the third lord and Mars occupy a sign ruled by a benefic. Well, let's just look at it in the Rashi first. So first of all, we see the third lord, Saturn, is in a sign ruled by a benefic, Jupiter. We see that Mars is in a sign ruled by Venus, another benefic. We need to take the third lord and Mars into the Navamsha as well. While we see Saturn goes into a sign ruled by Mars, a malefic. But Mars is in a benefic sign once again. So speaking to a benefic nature. So there is some difficulty for the brother because of that Saturn. And that shows us that problems in relationship to brothers will come out possibly during Saturn dashas or negative Saturn transits to this third house, or Saturn itself might be troublesome for the brother. So this is one way that you can use this particular principle. Now let's look at the idea of courage, patience, and bravery. The third lord in an angle or trine and in good dignity can indicate a courageous and patient and brave native. Well, the third lord, again, is Saturn. It goes into an angle, first house. It's in friend's sign, friend's dignity, and it's actually hemmed in between two benefic planets. And we have a benefic in the third. So this can speak to a courageous, patient, and brave native, because all these things line up. Okay, and these are the examples that we have for the third and fourth house. And again, you can go to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, go to the blog post where I share this video, and you'll see the full list of third and fourth house indications so that you can memorize them, review them, and apply them to different charts to get your own experiences. So thank you very much.